My name is Pili Swain. I am 38. I do a podcast called Go Deep, big Snyder Cut supporter.
I'm Adam Casey. I'm 38, cartoonist, and I managed a comic book store for 10 years.
And I'm Ryan, and with Tommy, co-host. Pili, I have you here because was it Wednesday?
Mm-hmm.
We received information that there is going to be a Snyder Cut of Justice League. Zack Snyder's The Justice League. This is something that has been building up for 2 years now. How many years?
About 2.5, about 2 years and 6 months.
What was the Snyder Cut movement a reaction to?
In November 2017, Justice League came out, and it kind of had some problems when they were shooting it. Zack Snyder's daughter committed suicide kind of at the end of him shooting. When he shoots, he kind of edits that same day. They edit and shoot at the same time. So it was lucky that he got about 90% of it done, which he completed principles photography, which legally said he could do the movie. But no one knew that at the time. It was, they made it out like Joss Whedon came in to help him finish the movie, right? So the Justice League came out, and everyone was like, yo, this is not a Zack Snyder movie. Something's going on. And a few people online just started, hashtagging release the Snyder Cut, because they kind of saw that a lot of scenes that was in the trailer wasn't actually in the movie. So Warner Brothers was kind of trying to switch tones and go lighthearted at the same time Zack Snyder was finishing up his movie. So Jeff Johns, Toby Emmerich, and a few other guys wanted to go the Disney route, like lighthearted for kids, make a lot of money because, you can bring a whole family to the theater. Mm-hmm. But I guess the DC fans wasn't having it. They were a little too, I don't know, I guess more mature or grown, and they were like, yo, this is not the movie we wanted. This is not the movie we promised. And started kind of like an online petition. Zack Snyder kind of jumped in a little bit and started sharing pictures from behind the scenes. And
on Vero, right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Not Facebook, not Instagram, Vero. And
I
feel like the whole platform, he built that. I feel like that whole platform was all of it.
Right.
He made it popular.
Right, he did. When his daughter died, it was a lot of people on Twitter kind of making like memes about suicide and stuff like that. So he left social media and only went to Vero. On Vero, a lot of directors will be able to watch your content. It could be a regular person that just put content up. Zack Snyder might watch it, so.
Zack Snyder's my friend.
Yeah, I know.
Friend.
I introduced you.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
He started sharing stuff on Vero, behind the scenes picture to the movie. The fans start getting crazier and crazier and crazier. So about 3 years later, a bunch of stuff happened. 3 years later is today. So a bunch of stuff happened in the meantime. Like we got billboards in Times Square. We got ads in San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con. We did flyovers at Burbank Studios, California. We did flyovers, just all wherever they had meetings at AT&T. We tried to fly something over and say release the Snyder Cut.
The activism was intense.
Yeah, activism was crazy. I didn't know it was going to be that crazy. I got in it because Zack Snyder's assistant saw one of my kids' videos and shared it. And then when they shared it, Zack Snyder liked it. So at that time, Zack Snyder wasn't on social media, so anything he liked would just blow up the internet. So everyone would be like, "Oh shit, what is this guy? Who is this? Who are these little kids?" So just from people wanting to see what Zack Snyder liked, it kind of created a little market for us. So we just tried to kill it on Twitter, and it came up our 2-year anniversary, November 17th, last year. We did 1 million tweets in one day, in one Sunday, and about another 300,000 throughout that week. And so that made a bunch of big corporations want to come join us.
Eventually, the actors started to tweet. I remember it was like a big epic day when they finally started to acknowledge the Snyder Cut.
Once Ben Affleck did it, it was over, because for the longest, everyone said we were like conspiracy theorists or this doesn't exist, you know, all kind of stuff like that. But when Ben Affleck did it, it went to a whole nother level, because Jason Momoa, he was saying release the Snyder Cut during his movie, but he wasn't like a big star at the time. Even though his movie made $1 billion, most people could still say he's a conspiracy theorist or he's crazy.
Well, the funny thing is, and I want to definitely open it up to Adam and everyone else, but the funny thing is, there was the whole release of Snyder Cut versus it doesn't exist war was just pointless. Like you guys that were saying release the Snyder Cut, you guys weren't saying that there's a full out movie with special effects. It's here. You're saying that something out there exists. Let's work towards making it watchable and release that. Meanwhile, the guys were like, this doesn't exist. It doesn't have the special. You guys weren't saying that. That's my take of it.
It was Jeff Johns, pretty much, who was kind of pushing a campaign supposedly to remove Zack Snyder. People think it was a conspiracy a lot, but business say it was just business. They wanted to copy Disney. They wanted to be lighthearted, blah, blah, blah. Zack Snyder just wasn't that. So in the process of them trying to replace him, what they did, they tried to kill Justice League completely, because they greenlit a movie with Ava DuVernay called New Gods. New Gods. But Zack Snyder was supposedly going to introduce Darkseid first. So then they started introducing Deathstroke into Jeff Johns' TV series, Titans or something like that. But Zack Snyder and Ben Affleck was going to introduce Deathstroke first. So they were trying to completely just erase that completely. So
you said kill Justice League. You mean kill really Snyderverse?
Snyderverse, right?
Yes,
right.
And pivot to a more lighthearted universe.
The original Wonder Woman was Zack Snyder, pretty much. Patty Jenkins helped, but Zack Snyder did a lot of work because supposedly she couldn't get down the fighting part. So Zack Snyder came in and helped with that. Zack Snyder came in and helped with Aquaman. More action scenes also, even though James Wan, he can do his thing. But once they kind of got Zack Snyder out of the way, what they did is they made Birds of Prey more lighthearted. Harley Quinn didn't shoot people with bullets. She had like bean bags and, you know, different stuff like that.
Aquaman, how does that play into all this?
So Aquaman was supposedly right after, it was supposed, story-wise, it's supposed to be right after Justice League. So Jason Momoa the whole time was supporting Zack Snyder. So we were kind of thinking there was something connected with Justice League and Aquaman. But there was one connection in the original Justice League and the Snyder Cut where Aquaman was supposed to ride off at the end of the day and go see his father. And that was supposed to start Aquaman. But they took that out. They took a few other things out, but what happened was James Wan started secretly seeing Zack Snyder to help him continue the story. But what they did is, like, let's say Wonder Woman 84, they took out her sword and they took out her shield and they left her with only her whip.
What's interesting about, I guess, the sort of evolution of DC movies is that Man of Steel really started the modern DC universe, for lack of a better word. It's not really a universe, I guess we can kind of say that. And Man of Steel, I think, is great. I think it's a really great movie. It's an interesting, fresh take on Superman. And then, of course, Batman versus Superman comes along, and I don't think there's any way that could live up to the hype that people had in their heads for when you tell somebody, hey, this is going to be a movie between Batman and Superman. And so you're thinking, oh, Michael Keaton, or you're thinking the disembodied voice of Kevin Conroy, you're thinking Christopher Reeve, you're thinking whatever. There is no way that could have lived up to the hype. And the thing about both Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman is they're closer to real movies than comic book movies.
Right.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, like, there's a better chance 20, 30 years from now, those will be taught in film school. The same way that, like, Westerns aren't really taught in film school, but they'll teach High Noon, or they'll teach Unforgiven or something like that. Same way with like Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, they're not just sort of popcorn movies. And I think a lot of people don't know what to do with that because Marvel's been, on the ball about pumping out movies, 2 to 3 a year. And so it's what people expect a movie to be. It's supposed to be bright. There's supposed to be jokes about every 6 minutes or so, maybe something a little crude, maybe some alien or some guy who doesn't really understand human things. And it's like, what's a Pop-Tart? And like, haha, I love Pop-Tarts, So there's all these kind of like catchphrases and stuff. And that's not the Snyder movies,
Gosh, I remember when Flash landed on top of Wonder Woman.
Right.
I'm like, what is this? This is not supposed to happen in a Justice League. I mean, in a DC movie.
Right. And so by the time you get to Justice League, it just doesn't fit.
Right.
You see a lot of the touches of Snyder. There's a lot of the kind of darkness and the kind of ambiguity of what it means to be a hero. But there's also just like it's like a little. It doesn't feel right. It feels like a movie that has been edited to run in the allotted time, like they used to do on, TV and stuff. And what's funny is that I hate Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's been a terrible influence on movie-going culture. But Batman versus Superman is 28%, but somehow Justice League is 40%. That's insane. People, there's no way that they can do that. That people have seen these movies and have given those grades. So I think what you're left with is face of DC movies being obviously Batman and Superman are the face, and of course Wonder Woman being a breakout star with her movie. I think you're left with DC trying to kind of hedge their bets a little bit on the sort of marquee talent, and they let the other sort of characters play in their own sandbox, for lack of a better term. So you got like the Aquaman movie, which is I think really great. I think it's a flashy, fun. It's very much in that Marvel style where like here's a lot of different locations. Here's some funny scenes. There is literal toilet humor in Aquaman when they're doing the chase and the bad guy hits the toilet or whatever.
But you can also see the director's imprint, which is why I like DC Warner, because I think they still have the director's influence.
Right, and now you have Shazam, which is just so charming. It's so fun. It's lighthearted, but also dark because hey, it's really scary to have these magical evil demons embodying all the sins of man, running around. So what you're left with is DC movies being whatever they need to be, which is great when they work. Justice League didn't really work. It wasn't what it needed to be. I personally think Birds of Prey wasn't what it needed to be. I think it could have been a little up the stakes a little bit on that. But you've got things like Joker, which is a fantastic, examination of the character in a certain time period, in a certain set of circumstances that a lot of any person could find themselves in. And so, I think, there's definitely a chance. I think DC sees a chance, and Warner's, I guess, specifically, sees a chance to make the marquee characters be the most marketable. And unfortunately, that kind of, I don't know, hams them in a little bit. We'll see how, it goes with the Batman and where they go with that. But
I have faith in the Batman. And the director.
It could be good, and that's the thing too, is that everybody have always sort of crapped on DC movies before they come out. I remember when it was like Heath Ledger's the Joker.
It's so draining. It's so draining.
People have gotten it wrong pretty much all the time. Granted, Justice League's a little, whatever, but
Justice League actually fulfilled the negative.
Right, it's the exception that proves the rule, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
We're going to see 2 Batmans and 2 Jokers because in the Snyder Cut, Ben Affleck will come back as Batman.
I think he'll come back.
Yeah, he is. Jared Leto is going to be in the Snyder Cut also.
And there's also still room for Ben Affleck to be Batman in a future film.
Right. Yeah, because they were years off.
Because the Batman movie takes place in the past.
90s.
That's in the 90s. So even we still don't know if that world's connected to the mainstream DC world, but either way, it's still the past.
Right.
So, and Batman could still be Ben Affleck in the present, in the future.
Right.
So.
Right. He will be. He if you look at him, he's been working out every time you see him saying release the Snyder Cut. He's looking buff. But he is he's supposed to commit suicide in the Snyder Cut.
Yeah. So do you think?
Spoiler.
Yeah, sorry, spoiler. My bad.
Well, that's just it. That's my question. Then I think I wanted Tommy to get into it, but so Ben Affleck had this 5 parts. I'm not Ben Affleck. Sorry.
Zack Snyder.
Zack Snyder had this 5-part storyline, correct? And we know a lot of the details of that storyline. So, number one, will he get to work on that storyline? And two, will he have to change a lot of it so he can now surprise us?
Yeah, I think they're changing right now. And yeah, I think the 5-part is back in business. Probably more because, J.J. Abrams is there now too. So there could be someone that can do a Man of Steel too,
I was about to say, if anybody could do Man of Steel, it can be him. Like he could bring in that touch of Donner, but I think he still has something tourist about him. So
I think J.J. Abrams can do Man of Steel too, and I think Zack can fix his 5 arc, and I know James Wan is going to do Aquaman too, and The Rock has this series coming out. Black Adam is coming out.
Then the Suicide Squad.
And David Ayer's Suicide, the real Suicide Squad is coming out. If you saw AT&T last night, they started tweeting unreleased pictures of Joker.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so the original, because they trashed Suicide Squad also because it was connected to the Snyder Cut. And China said it was too demonic, so they wouldn't show it. So they edited out all of the bad parts. So now AT&T is kind of hinted last night they're going to release the original Suicide Squad.
I've been with DC movies for a long time, and I definitely see the potential. I've been a supporter, but I will say they've always been reactive. Warner Brothers, I don't know if it's DC or Warner Brothers, but whoever is behind the movies has always been reactive. So let's go back to like 1997, or let's go back to the dark Batman Returns. Tim Burton creates Batman Returns, and he puts his spin on it that makes it a big Tim Burton movie. But then, it scared kids. Penguin bit into a nose. It was too sexual. So they had to, and it didn't sell the toys. So then they had to do Batman Forever. Mm-hmm. And then that just went too far and crazy into Batman and Robin. Mm-hmm. And because of that, then they stopped making movies for a little bit until I know there was a Steel movie and other things, but basically Superman Returns came out, and Superman Returns was reacting and following the tradition of the Donner films. So when Man of Steel came out, I was like, wow, finally, we're not reacting to anything. They're actually trying to build something. I mean, I know we have Snyder, Christopher Nolan's movies. I didn't mention that. And I think Man of Steel was still kind of working off of the deconstructive realism of the Nolan world. But for the most part, I felt like Man of Steel was trying to build a world, a universe.
Right. People forget that the Nolan movies were like the gold standard of comic book movies for as long as they existed. It was like, oh my God, can you believe what I just saw? And people forget about that sort of dark realism, how terrible it would really be if superheroes were real, how chaotic your life would be, just, going about your everyday life. And here's, this big, superhero battle or whatever. People forget that. Like that was what was printing money was Nolan's dark vision of Batman and Gotham City,
And then all of a sudden the tone changes.
So I don't see, so I think when you look at like what was, Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, of course that would make sense because things like, Green Lantern flopped, Jonah Hex flopped,
Green Lantern had the Marvel formula. I think, remember when that came out?
Right at sort of the same time the Marvel formula was happening. And that's what people forget. Like the Marvel formula, like it was Iron Man, and it wasn't that Iron Man was anything. I mean, it's a fine movie. Don't get me wrong. It's a solid 7, 8 out of 10. But it's shiny. It's bright. Every other superhero movie's at nighttime. We're in tunnels and stuff, and it's very dark. And here's a guy having fun being a superhero, and that is refreshing. But that's like saying if every Western was like Silverado, and then you have things like Unforgiven, Hail Rider, and Tombstone and stuff like that. Like you can't all just be fun and quippy and happy. Otherwise it doesn't. It's just fluff. And I think a lot of people, don't get me wrong, a lot of people like fluff. A lot of people like just turning their mind off, watching some cool explosions, some cool effect shots, and being entertained. But I personally think movies of all kinds can be more than just something to eat popcorn and play on your phone, and I think that's what the Snyderverse movies are.
And don't forget that Nolan brought Zack Snyder over because they wanted Nolan to do the DC universe, and he was like, you know, he didn't want to commit to 20 movies that on their original slate.
Yeah,
so he was like, no, let's bring Zack Snyder to do it. You know, Zack didn't commit, but he committed to 5 of them. You know,
right? Because we all, I think, by The Dark Knight Rise, we knew that Nolan wasn't interested in building a DC world.
Right.
Like that was just supposed to be his Elseworld interpretation of Batman.
Right.
And so then there was supposed to be a Justice League movie. I think, what was that? Was it around 2007? The writer's strike had an impact on this Justice League movie, correct? It was directed by who was supposed to direct that? The Mad Max guy.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was behind that. And that was supposed to establish the world, right? Originally?
George Miller?
Yeah, George Miller.
Yeah.
Was that supposed to establish the DC universe originally?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So one of the things that makes this interesting and how it ties to generational talk is, I think, ever since Napster, I feel like the online community, and which just happens to be maybe in our generation, I don't know the facts of that, so I have no data to support that, but I feel like the online community has definitely had a big influence on the mainstream industry, maybe even toppling it to a certain extent. You know, we wanted to create a world where music could be streamed and downloaded, and in the 90s, you know, we were buying CDs from Tower Records, but by 2010, we're now streaming and downloading films. Now I feel like we're entering a world where fans could actually, or they're interacting with the directors on social media, and you actually feel like you're being heard. But the industry is actually hearing the fans. What world are we creating right now? Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm gonna go with the idea is good, but the execution is bad. We're recording this on May 23rd, right? And just last night, Hana Kimura, a Japanese pro wrestler, died by suicide, based off of being cyberbullied and harassed on Twitter and stuff. And so we've really opened up, you know, Pandora's box here of like letting out, you know, things that you would never say to a real person, you know, but you can say, oh, you know, this movie's so bad, watching it gave my eyes cancer, you know, like, you know, everyone considers themselves like a critic now, or that their opinion is worth hearing. But if you were an actual critic at a newspaper or on like a TV show or something like that, the things that people say wouldn't ever be printed or aired because it's so terrible, and it doesn't necessarily have any impact on the actual product. You know, everybody craps on Batman versus Superman. All they can say is Martha, LOL. You know, I have legitimate issues with Batman versus Superman. The cinematography's a little dark. Last third's could do some tightening up. The dossier of superheroes could be introduced a little better. I have legitimate, you know, actual criticisms that aren't just sucks, you know, and that kind of stuff passes for criticism now. And I think you know, you get a little dopamine hit every time you get a little notification on your phone and somebody liked your post, they comment on your post. Well, people are finding out that if you post negative memes or you trash things, you get likes. And I can't, you know, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I think we're seeing a lot of negative actual reviews of things in legitimate publications because those get clicks, you know, and that sells ads. And that's what newspapers and blogs and websites need, you know? And so I think there is a culture now that rewards negativity. And I think it does have the potential to go too far. I mean, we had Kelly Marie Tran, you know, she got off of social media because people were, you know, giving her a hard time about being in Star Wars, and Daisy Ridley, same thing. And so I think like I said, the concept of being able to talk to a creator and finding out, you know, their inspirations and what they're thinking about doing and what they wanted to do but couldn't because the technology was limited, or all these kind of great things that you would only hear at like the Pili Center or at like a, you know, a special Q&A at a festival or something like that. That concept of social media is great. But all the other stuff of just piling on and just being negative and just, you know, tearing down a trailer, you know, for a movie that you're not even going to watch, you know, like all those people that were piling on like Aladdin, like you're not going to go see Aladdin. What do you care what the genie looks like?
Right.
Or like there was all that outrage about Sonic having teeth. Like, holy crap!
Human
But
teeth.
I
Okay.
was gonna say
On that issue, I'm glad they changed Sonic. That's a great example of the internet culture. This and the Snyder Cut are perfect example of the internet culture.
But I'm saying
having
the
been influenced.
outrage about Sonic having teeth like seemed a little overblown. But on a more serious note, he mentioned earlier about like on Zack Snyder's like Twitter account, like people talking about suicide after his daughter committed suicide. Like that's just, it's unconscionable. It's unconscionable that people would do stuff like that. And I think, like you said, there's so much potential on the good side for social media, and there's so much potential for just bringing out the worst in people. And it's sad that we see as much of that as we do. And like you said, I do think we see that leaking out. Like I read there are times that I'm reading things and I'm like, this sounds like a Facebook rant. I can't remember like a mainstream publication publishing stuff like this, just the way that the argument is presented in just like a Facebook screed, as opposed to like a rational, like trying to be, I'm like, obviously, things are emotional, but it's like trying to just be a somewhat like not using all these words about like demolish, someone got savaged, like all this stuff. It's like you're not a Facebook troll. You use some like better vocabulary, please.
It has created other voices in the conversation. For instance, Pili, you gain a lot of fans on your YouTube channel, and also created like a brotherhood amongst you and other people who have their channels. Like I remember just listening to you, panels with you and other people talking.
Yeah.
Do you care to mention them? They're pretty much, in my book, they're kind of like YouTube celebrities now.
Yeah.
As far as
it kind of became weird like that. Like, I guess this little Snyder, what they call themselves is the Spartans, like Zack Snyder's 300 crew.
That's what I wanted you to bring up. Okay.
Yeah. So those guys, I guess, went online, man, and we witnessed everything. Like he was talking about cyberbullying. Man, we witnessed that. In like, say for instance, we got us, us 5 right here, or us 4, or we got a little crew. Let's say 10 people, and 10 people go out and we say, yo, let's make a billboard and release the Snyder Cut on it. So then those 10 people, one of them might do a podcast, and he starts gathering more people. So then one guy might be good at, fundraisers. So he starts getting money. So next thing you know, they make a billboard. Zack Snyder sees it. Zack Snyder shares it. So then some guys who gets jealous of that crew who just did that perfect thing for Release the Snyder Cut movement, they'll go and troll those guys to death, pretty much. I mean, trolling, like hard trolling. The internet is crazy, and I didn't know Twitter was that crazy. I was just thinking I could do a podcast, I could say Release the Snyder Cut, I can hashtag it, I can talk about movies, blah, blah, blah. But no, these guys, oh man, I didn't know the internet was that wild. I didn't know the internet was that crazy. But it turned out where it started to become like a fad to say Release the Snyder Cut. It started to become trendy. So I've seen it go from 30 people to 5,000 to 100,000 to 1 million. And I remember the 30. My kids were in the 30. But we had to go through everything. So it did. But what really saved us is AT&T buying Warner Brothers. Because Warner Brothers kind of ignored us for like 3 years. Like, it didn't exist. You guys are conspiracy theorists, blah, blah, blah. But I guess the streaming war started getting hot with Disney Plus and Mandalorian and stuff like that. So HBO won the streaming contest with them.
Do you think that this will... I feel like the difference between DC and Marvel is that Marvel does have a spokesperson that could pretty much clear up the misinformation.
Right.
And meanwhile, DC or Warner Brothers has allowed a lot of misinformation flourish. Do we now have that one spokesperson that could probably clear up the confusion?
No. Well,
That this prevents, because if the misinformation is cleared up, then people won't go into the new films with a whole bunch of baggage.
right. So it was Zack Snyder, but he was kind of like a humble dude. He really didn't speak. He just did it through his work. But Kevin Feige of Marvel has a friend, Jeff Johns, who I've mentioned already. They were, college roommates, but one of them works at DC, one of them works at Marvel. But Jeff Johns wanted to be the Kevin Feige of DC. So to do that, I think they wanted a pretty similar roadmap. Lighthearted, kid movie, kid friendly. You can bring your whole family. They wanted a lot of kid tickets, but I just don't think that's what Warner Brothers or DC's fandom is. This is a fandom of Matrix and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. They wanted something more substantial than Marvel movies. So I think that's where we united at.
I want to
Harry Potter. Warner Brothers is Harry Potter too.
Oh, Harry Potter. You're right.
And Harry Potter films got darker
stuff and dark stuff there.
Right. You're right. I mean, it can be done. I think Marvel was doing a good job with it.
I worked in a comic book store for 10 years, and yes, the sort of average age of a comic book reader is 40-ish, plus or minus, depending on, the market and whatnot that they're in. And you definitely see with boomers and older readers a desire to see things as they were when they were reading comics. So they want a Barry Allen Flash, they want the Legion of Superheroes, they want the Fantastic Four to be front and center in the Marvel Universe. And that's just not the way of the world. You see things with Gen X and millennials where they're more open to interpretation. They're not as, they don't have that it's not part of their core values that, oh, hey, Hal Jordan's the Green Lantern. Because honestly, most kids know Jon Stewart is the Green Lantern. They watch the Justice League cartoon. If you tell them, hey, there's a white Green Lantern, like, oh yeah, maybe that's in the Injustice game or something, like it doesn't register with a lot of younger people.
Technically, we've never even known Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan was always Parallax, a villain.
Right. For me, yeah. When I came into comics, and he was around for a little bit, and then it was Kyle Rayner. And So you definitely see
Hispanic. I didn't even know that he's Hispanic.
Yeah. So you definitely see you see that definitely in the comics, the printed comics where there's a desire, a pushback on like diversity and like having Miles Morales around, having Moon Girl, which is going to be a cartoon I think on Disney Plus. You've got all these different kind of interpretations of the characters and just sort of expanding it out, because honestly a lot of the stuff is tired. I mean, these characters have been around 60, 70, 80 years.
There is no definitive character. Every time there's a new, in the comic books, every time there's a new creative team, they always put their mark on it.
Sure, yeah. And so there's
Why can't the films do that?
exactly. And I think people kind of forget that the sort of must-read stuff for superhero stuff is often the kind of Elseworldsy kind of things. It's Kingdom Come. It's Dark Knight Returns.
Killing Joke. That's not canon, right?
What's that?
The Killing Joke, is that canon?
It sometimes is, sometimes isn't. Depends on who's writing it. Superman Red Sun. There's all these kind of things that are really interesting. It's because they're not bogged down in, well, you didn't read issue 312 of Thor, and so now this doesn't make any sense to you. Right, yeah. And so I think definitely on the comic side and the movie side are a little different of what they need, but generally speaking, both of them need to be relevant and need to be interesting and keep making interesting movies, especially with these older characters. Otherwise you run the risk of them turning into like the Lone Ranger and John Carter and Shadow, like these pulp characters that nobody really cares about, and Hollywood once in a while will trot them out and just they don't know what to do with it, and it doesn't really resonate with the public because you've got the sort of old timers come in and go, well, that's not the way it used to be. Well, who cares?
I always love it.
Stories,
I always love it when superhero films, especially Superman movies or Superman stories, reflect the time period. So you have George Reeves. Is it Reeves or Reeves? George Reeves. Which one?
Reeve and Christopher Reeves.
Yeah. So George Reeves, he was the Superman during the 1950s. Great power. George Reeves is like crashing through doors, like just beating up the bad guys. The weird communist, stand-ins. And then I think Christopher Reeves, Superman, came in during a very idealistic time, you know, it's the 60s and the 70s, and it's an awakening, and people want to believe that
Watergate and
yeah.
everything like that.
And,
So
you know, and you want to believe that a man can fly.
yeah.
And so it makes sense that we would have a film like Man of Steel, because when that came out, Great America wasn't the same.
Mm-mm.
Like we're having a conversation of what does that mean to be great. You know, it's a very deconstructive time period. So I just love how the Snyderverse films reflect that.
Yeah, I mean, look at Man of Steel. He was like a hobo with PTSD. You know, he was moving from job to job.
Right.
He was hitchhiking. He had all these issues with either saving people or not. He watched his dad die. I mean, he had a lot of issues, and you know, that's what they made Superman like because they say Superman's hardest part is to make him look like a real person. You know, he can do so much as in punch planets and do this, but to humanize him, you know, like seeing him get picked on at work and having to walk out or something like that. You know, I think Zack Snyder did a great job, but remember what people hated about Man of Steel is because he broke Zod's neck, and that's one more thing they were like, oh, Superman don't kill, you know. And
but
then,
he was backed in the corner. I guess this isn't a review of Man of Steel, but
that's an interesting point, and it kind of ties into, I think, the over sort of what we're talking about with the Snyderverse stuff is that those are serious things that heroes would have to face. It's like, it's not just, oh, hey, we're going to take you to Arkham, or we're going to take you to the Shield, you know, jail or whatever. Like, no, like if you've got this guy leveling a city, and powers aside, it's your moral imperative to stop people from dying. Like, if you can save somebody from dying, you as a person, you as a human, that's your moral imperative. If you have the ability to save people, right? Like, and what's funny is that amongst all that destruction, when does he kill Zod? When that family is trapped, when there's a group of tourists right there. So we put a face to the destruction and the mayhem.
Good
which
filmmaking.
Counterbalance to Avengers with New York City being leveled, and then they go eat shawarma, you know, like, and that's basically and that's what ties into the BVS with the hero cake kind of thing. I was just sitting there eating my hero cake, and I think that's brilliant. That's a brilliant commentary on the
villains.
I feel conflicted about the decision to have Superman kill somebody, because on the one hand, like, there is that realism aspect of the fact that sometimes there is the lesser of two evils, and there's no other option other than a shitty option, and you have to pick the least bad option. However, on the other hand, too, oftentimes people use that ends justify the means mentality to justify things that were absolutely not necessary, as a way to do something bad. And so so I always feel conflicted when, on the one hand, it's like, yes, something was the lesser of two evils. On the other hand, people use that in really awful ways. The end justify the means mentality to do awful things that absolutely weren't necessary. And I guess one of the things with Superman is, you know, I grew up, you know, watching Smallville too, and you know, it was just like always finding another way. And so I it's hard for me to not love that.
To find another way, he had 10 seasons.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying, like, there's also I also love that appeal of doing whatever you can to try to find an alternative way than to just simply, you know, kill somebody.
But we also got to understand that Man of Steel, he wasn't really Superman yet.
Right.
He wasn't. He just realized that he was Kal-El.
Right.
He was basically Clark Kent, with a guy who didn't fit in, who always felt like an alien.
Right.
And so, I think when you look at it from the fact that this is really Superman Begins, this is his origin story, and what he does in his film creates who he becomes as a superhero. I think that's why it's beautiful. It's so poetic. Batman and Superman was an answer to Man of Steel.
Yeah.
You know,
but I mean, like, the superheroes are supposed to be like the people that we can look up to always do the right thing and figure out how to do figure out the way in which, you know, you can't deny the moral virtue of what they did. You know what I'm saying?
Is
like,
there that much
inspire us to be our best selves and to figure out the way to do things in a way that minimizes, damage to all parties.
But do we really get into the superheroes' heads like that in like the Marvel films?
No, and that's
why
Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman is so unsettling for people. It's because they don't like thinking about, hey, these superheroes are real, and they probably accidentally kill millions.
Oh yeah.
Well,
save, everybody, and what in their actions and in their exploits and stuff. And it's an uncomfortable thing to think about, and that's why I think Snyder did Watchmen, and did it so well. Is that he gets that sort of psychosis that it takes to be a hero, is that you have to compartmentalize those kind of bad things as well as being able to do them. And
I mean, let's go back. So Superman, Clark Kent realizes that he's an alien, and not just that. So you have a world that for the first time discovers aliens exist. That's a big.
Metropolis is introduced to the Superman, possibly the greatest title card in the history of cinema.
Right. And then on top of that, Superman meets somebody from his home planet. And this guy's a bad guy, and he has to kill him to stop him. Can you imagine the emotional impact that has on his character? So now it makes sense why Superman would have a no-killing policy. Would think things through a little bit. Now it feels a little bit motivated because of the events that happened in Man of Steel.
And he's so anguished when he kills Zod. Like
he is. That yell that he does.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, I think there's also that the one of the ways that Superman not killing and superheroes not killing in general is, at least in Superman's case, is the upbringing of Clark and Martha Kent though too, and you know what I'm saying. I think that his wholesome upbringing is supposed to be part of the reason why he is such a morally upstanding person.
Yeah, humanity. The films, Snyder, that is a criticism. I don't think the Snyder films explored Clark Kent as much.
Right.
I am a huge, believe it or not, I am a huge fan of Clark Kent, sometimes more so than Superman. Maybe that's me growing up on Lois and Clark, but I love Clark Kent. And I do feel like that's missing.
Though, about his upbringing, and that's what's so perfect about Man of Steel, is that when Pa Kent allows himself to die, that's teaching Cal, right, these are our lives, you can't interfere with our lives. So he is actually taking what Pa Kent taught him to save lives, because it is the Zod is interfering with these people. I think it's a touching element to that story.
No, I certainly with the situation that was going on, there's no doubt that Superman has to stop Zod. It's just a matter of if there was someone who was committed to making sure that Superman didn't kill somebody, Superman would be thinking oh, I need to kill this person, but I need to figure out a better way to stop them, and then figure out that third option for how they save the person and don't kill Zod,
But for every second he doesn't have that option, more people are dying. And I think that's what's so real about it, is that it's a split-second decision of okay, he's killed so many people already, I have to do something to stop this. This is how it is. I have to take a life in order to save millions and the entire planet, really. Because with the whole world engine going on and everything, so...
when if we're talking about it from a realistic perspective, theoretically this could happen, but it's this is a movie that I don't know. I guess when I go to superhero movies,
it comes down to what do you want from a superhero film?
Yeah, and I guess I certainly understand people want the realism. I guess I like the idealism aspect of. Because I grew up watching the Batman movies and the X-Men movies in the 90s, and I thought, they were good. I'm like Ryan was saying, I'm just a fan of I'm a fan of superhero movies. I really never seen a superhero movie that I just absolutely didn't like. I always like them to some extent, but the ones that really got into, and I guess that this just because hearing your conversation, I felt so attacked because I was they're talking about me right now. But
by the way, we had another YouTuber and a Marvel fan. Yeah. He was supposed to join this conversation, so sorry. There wasn't.
No, I was just gonna say the Spider-Man movies. The first and second one, like those are the ones that really got me into superhero movies and the superhero genre. And like I loved it, and just like him, like the idealism and always trying to do the right thing, and but I'm like I think obviously the Christopher Nolan movies were just like The Dark Knight is one of the best movies that has ever been made, in my opinion.
You know what? And let's go back to the early Spider-Man films. You know, I think they did find a balance. I brought up, like, do we ever really see the superheroes think and try to decide? And I think we did see that happen in the early 2000 Spider-Man films. So, yeah, he did have to think a lot on his feet. But as far as Man of Steel, I can't really figure I can't think of how he would have got out of this situation.
Well, I've heard some people say all he had to do is take him straight up. But
I heard that.
like take him off the planet. That's what I've heard this argument a lot. But I think
he did that with Doomsday too. And that didn't really.
Doomsday came back. It didn't work. And then if you look in Batman vs Superman, there was the same argument. Oh, Batman don't have guns, because in the trailer they showed Batman on a crane and he was watching with a long rifle. But it was like a little dart that he was, shooting. Yeah. But everyone was like, "Oh, Batman doesn't have guns," Batman. So it's like Zack Snyder is kind of doomed if he do, he doomed if he don't.
But it's that Batman. Remember, that Batman didn't always have guns too. Remember, we also got to think context of the universe. That Batman was starting to get into a little darker, obsessive territory.
Right.
The Dark Knight Returns. Batman, the 1980s version of it. That's part of his character. In that world, he wasn't always that guy. And he becomes that guy, especially as he becomes obsessive in his quest to destroy Superman or Clark Kent. And then he comes to his senses. It's called character development, guys,
I'm like, I guess one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, if we have like superheroes going around killing people, shooting people with guns and shit like that, then what we're basically just having is like Tom Cruise, like or some just action star like Rambo or something, but just in a costume.
They shot up the place in those 80s films all the time.
But what I'm saying is just like these are just then they're not superheroes anymore. What they are is just regular dudes with some powers.
Iron Man,
and there's lots of comics about that.
Iron Man has missiles. Iron Man shoots out these little kind of projectile,
Yeah, there are a lot of comic books that really examine that, like especially like lots of superheroes around, because I mean, you don't realize it. I mean, there's 10,000, 100,000 heroes in the Marvel universe, but most folks really focus on 20 to 50 of them. But there are lots of different kind of stories out there that talks about like what it's like to both live in a world like that, like where there are superheroes all around you, and then of course what it means to be a superhero amongst all this stuff. There's a lot of that kind of thing, and I always sort of think about what it would be like to live in those worlds, because it would be all your commercials would be for personal injury lawyers. Have you been injured by a superhero?
Great bullet or so.
Yeah.
I'm now wondering if sorry, Adam.
I was just gonna say, to follow up on our discussion about what Superman should have done. It's very easy to take apart something from a movie, because once you start to unravel it, like a lot of times it loses meaning. For example, like in Casablanca, there are unsigned or signed unquestionable letters of transit floating around that anybody can get out of the country. Why is that? Like if you don't have that, then you don't have a movie. And and I think like if you don't have Superman become what he hates, and then you've lost the sort of thread, because that's his core, and it's all, the movie's all about like what his core values are. And so if you take away that moment for him of having to do something he doesn't want to do but ultimately has to, and I think that's what you'd lose the thread of the movie there. So like I said, it's easy to kind of pick away at things like, why didn't they do this, why didn't they do that? And
I mean, like I don't mean to like I don't mean to criticize it from the aspect of like any movie you see, and it's like if the person had just called the cops in the first 5 minutes, this whole movie didn't need to exist. Like I don't mean to critique it from that angle. I just meant from just the angle of approaching the movie, that you're gonna have a superhero kill somebody. And like I said, I'm not saying it was definitely the wrong move, but not my favorite move that was ever made in a superhero movie.
I'm just so in the next Wonder Woman film, Wonder Woman 84, the villain is Maxwell Lord, and in the comic
No
books,
spoilers, la 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 la.
yeah, this is it. Would this count as a spoiler? Because I'm not talking about the film.
No, yeah.
No, but that is a good question. I'm asking, like, does that count? In a comic book, here's my point, though. In a comic book, Wonder Woman snaps the head off of Maxwell Lord, the villain. This is the comic book. This is canon.
Yeah.
And the Justice League, turns on her like, oh my gosh, one of us killed. And they pretty much like turn on Wonder Woman for a little bit. So will that happen in Wonder Woman's film?
Well, that's why they took her sword away, because Zack Snyder had her behead in Steppenwolf.
Mm-hmm.
And they
shit.
didn't, they didn't want to. Oh, my bad. Damn, spoilers. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. No, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it as a spoiler, like, because if it's a spoiler, just like, God damn, beheading somebody.
Yeah, well, no, you just talked about the result.
Well, that was in Justice League, you mean?
Yeah.
And the Zack Snyder version of it. Yeah, but we're not even talking about how Aquaman pins him down first.
Right.
Pins him down
Right.
with his trident or whatever that's called, and then they take his head off.
Then they're gonna take his head off, right?
And and it is sad. My kids love superhero films, and they're all under 9, and it's sad that I can't watch my favorite superhero films with them because it's not age appropriate. So I do look at the people who go to see Marvel movies with their family and envy that. I'm like, gosh, aw.
Well, but what's interesting too though is they're not age ready now, but they will be, and not only will they be age ready, they'll appreciate it more because I think a lot of people, especially when they're getting into comics, they're like, oh, you got to read Dark Knight Returns, you got to read Watchmen, and while yes, those are really great works, don't get me wrong, love them. They mean more if you know more about comics, and it's not that not necessarily that they're designed for people who've read a lot of comics. It's just that it's a product of their time and their reaction to how Batman had been presented for so long, and a reaction in Watchmen to what superheroes are all just fun and bright and everything like that. And I think by the time your kids are old enough to watch, Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, that kind of stuff like that, they'll really appreciate it because they've seen like all the kind of fun, bright Marvel movies, and then they're like, "Whoa, Dad, have you seen this? This is crazy."
No, I mean, I guess it's just probably just from the reason why I go to fiction in the first place. It's just because like I watch the news 24/7. Like I have it on in the background at all times. I read all the. I know how shitty the world is. when I'm going to a comic book movie, I'm going to it because it's not realistic. Because it's letting me escape this world and go into this idealistic world and feed
where a man can
like
fly.
the optimism that I have of what humanity could be, you know what I'm saying? And it's like I know how awful we are. I see it all the time, and it's like people, doing the worst things, and then I go to this to see people trying to be the very best that people can be, and so I mean, like I understand that sometimes it's not realistic, but it's like I like it because of the fact that it's idealistic, and I do think that like as long as it's like within I'm like obviously no one can be a superhero like Superman, but it's like if they're trying to inspire us to be things that we could actually be, that's like one of the reasons why like realism doesn't. Realism is the way the world is, but it doesn't have to be exactly the way it is. And if superheroes can help inspire us to be better than it is, I don't know.
The Snyder movies kind of warn us about the trappings of power and what the pitfalls and what it means to be a good person. I think that especially like Batman and Batman versus Superman, like he's sort of at the end of his rope. You know what I mean? Like, and never mind the things that aren't on the screen, like the PTSD of losing your sidekick. And everything you've seen for a 20-30 year career, being a superhero, like that's I think it's a different kind of a presentation of an ideal, and the ideal is this is something to avoid. Like this, don't go down this path. This is a it's a warning.
Well, see, like
Snyder movies closer to being real movies is like that's what real movies aren't just here's the sanitized version of life. It's like here's what it really means to be down on your luck, or a bad person, or whatever.
Yeah.
And hopefully you learn from that, like, I don't want to be like that guy.
I guess I feel like the Nolan movies just did it, a little bit better. I like, because I like the way, in Superman and Spider-Man, like they would talk about like morality and like responsibility and stuff like that. And then like Nolan, he had that darker take, but like you still had like philosophical conversations about it, like when Batman, like not the deepest, obviously, philosophical conversation, but like when they were having in Dark Knight, when they're discussing with
Lucius Fox.
No, not Lucius Fox, but I'm specifically thinking of the dinner with Harvey Dent.
Oh, that one.
When they're talking about you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, and about the difference between like needing a white knight, a dark knight, and stuff. And like I don't know, I like the way that they tried to present it. Their message and their gritty take on things versus, like I said, I still liked the Snyder movies, but man, Nolan did it like the best that I've seen so far. Oh, I did want to say too though, Wonder Woman's been my favorite of these new movies, except for the score in that movie. The score drives me insane.
It's still memorable. That's what I love about DC movie scores. I love how
Wonder Woman score is great. That
I don't know. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. But the movie itself.
Who is this guy?
Was really good. Yeah.
Stone him. I'm a little burdened because I wanted to get this guy named RJ Snow. He has a YouTube page, and I wanted him to join the conversation because he's a YouTuber and he has a lot of he's definitely grown in this era. So this conversation makes me realize what the next topic has to be when we all get together next. The role of superhero films in general, like right now, like I think that's a whole subject. Like you bring up Westerns, like comparing, like why does the world need a certain type of superhero film? So
one thing I wanted to ask was, I guess one thing I'm fearful for I want to see the Snyder Cut too, but I'm a little fearful that maybe the people will be disappointed when it comes out, because I feel like there's so many expectations.
No, just give
this.
it to me. I just want to. Okay. I don't mind if it's bad or good.
The haters will still hate it. The
haters will still hate it, and all I need to know is what it is. Okay. Like just the mystery of like just the what if story. Like, oh my gosh, how would it have been if he did this?
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. That's kind of that really bothered me.
When is it coming out?
2021. That's all we know.
2021. But look how much stuff they took out. They took out Jared Leto out of Justice League. They took out Deathstroke out of Justice League. They took out it was supposed to be a
Lex Luthor had more
stuff. Cyborg had a lot more stuff. Lex Luthor had a lot more stuff. I've even heard that Hawkman was going to be in there. Darkseid is going to show up. Decide the families. Yeah. So there's no way it's going to be worse than Justice League. You know what I mean?
Oh no, yeah. I don't think it's going to be worse than the Justice League. I don't know what people are expecting in terms of how much better they think it's going to be, and if people are being set up for, if people are going to be disappointed thinking that like this is going to be like an Academy Award winning.
No, we just want the film. All right, I'm losing my light. We better close it.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. And if y'all ever need me back,
I definitely, because I didn't get the ideal panel, so I definitely want to have this conversation back. And Adam, you have some more points too to share.
Sure, yeah, we could talk all about fandom and what it means to be a fan in the 21st century and everything.
All right.
Like that. Yeah.
All right, to be continued.
I'd love to come back. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.